Welcome back. Today we're going to start with the Simgot EW300, and perhaps you prefer to call it Simgot. I prefer Simgo. I don't know, it's just easier for me to say. But I do have all three EW300 variants. This is the original EW300, this is the HBB version, and this is the DSP version. So originally I thought I was just going to be cool and listen to all three of them and come up with some comprehensive cool thing to talk about all three and the trade-offs in all three. But then I heard the original one was the first one I opened, and I just decided, oh, the set's super cool. There's lots of good stuff just to talk about with the EW300, and I decided that I was going to get to these guys next, but really talk about this one pretty quickly because it's an easy review. It's a really nice looking set. It's a really nice sounding set because it actually hits a lot of my preferences, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But yeah, kind of right off the bat, definitely it feels a little better in hand because it's a little weightier. It is a fingerprint magnet, and but it does say EW300, but it is a little bit weightier. Like sometimes you see the metal shells, and I think EW200 was not as weighty as EW300, but that's sort of off my memory. But yeah, this one actually feels a little bit weightier. It feels solid. It actually has a really nice look to it. But yeah, I should have actually weighed the two. But yeah, I do think that this one feels a little weightier than what I remember on EW200. You also do get a couple things. You get a couple nozzles, right? So there's a silver, and this is the gold or the brass nozzle. I call it the gold. You do get some more O-rings. You do get some foams, which are actually sitting on my desk, and I should have brought them down, but we'll talk about them. But they're actually sitting on my desk. And through the magic of pausing, we now have the foam. So you do get 6 pairs of foams, and you can kind of get a look at them. They're actually low density foams, and we'll talk a little bit about those as well. Cable is a kind of goldish black combination. It's actually kind of nice. Not all that far from other Simgo cables. They tend to all look very similar. This one is no different. Nice cable. No real issues with it. I think they have a style of cable that they've been using for a while, and this one is kind of no different. So we'll push this kind of out of the way, push these a little bit out of the way, and we'll start at the top. So the first thing that I noticed about EW300, this isn't really like their other recent Simgo sets that really adhere to the Harman Target or even exceeded the Harman Target, that were slightly brighter, definitely more treble than the Harman Target, or rised higher above the upper mids on Harman Target. You know, this one is not like that. A lot more mid bass, a lot less upper mids. Both ends sound cleaner than I expected. On the silver and the gold, will kind of soften that up a bit. But as we look at the graph, you can kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about. So Super Mix 4, even EM10, they pretty much adhere to the Harman Target. So they drop the mid bass down to the floor at about 200. They hit this 10 dB curve on the upper mids and treble. It has a very Harman-like sound to it. So you can see with EW300, they did not do that. So they still have the sub bass, which is about Harman style. The mid bass, they definitely bumped that up. It's more present. It actually has mid bass, which is a great change. And they also lowered down the upper mid, so it is below the Harman Target. And again, bringing these down a little bit will make this sound a little bit more present. These two are in really nice balance, and you still get the upper treble extension as you would expect from Simgo. So again, I think as a tuning, I think this one pretty much hit my preferences. If you look back at what I said about Super Mix, it was pretty much poke this up, push this down, and you end up with a very nice stage and a very nice general appealing sound. Pretty much exactly what they delivered on EW300. So yeah, this one right out of the box, I liked it simply for those reasons. The tuning was much closer to what I prefer. I mean, that's what I was expecting. I was expecting it to hit Harman Target, but definitely more about what I preferred. So second thing I noticed was the bass on this one. So it sounds like a really nice driver. It has a really tight and fast. It has nice impact. It has nice rumble, but it definitely has a tighter and faster feel to it. And it does have a really nice sub-mid glide, and I didn't really poke that. It didn't really show that. But so this angle here is, I don't know if it's not 45 degrees, but you don't have the typical ramping up like the sub bass typically does on a Harman set, and they didn't drag it down into the floor like at 200 the way other sets do. So you actually get a nice balance of sub bass and mid bass, which is a very nice change, especially at this price point, especially at this with a hybrid. You don't hear that many that actually do both of them quite well. This one happens to be one that does it. So this is definitely not a base shy set with either nozzle. And that will kind of lead you to the balance on this one is really different than other Simgo sets, meaning it's closer to in balance, not leaning as bright as I was expecting. It definitely has a full sounding low end and a hybrid detailed upper end. Not much of a low volume set either. You definitely have to turn this one up just a little bit. It's very uncharacteristic for Simgo to turn them up a little bit to get them to fall in balance. They tend to be a little bit lower volume centric. Balance. This one, you definitely want to turn it up a little bit so the mids fall in place, the treble falls in place, and it projects out into a nice big sound. And I tend to find that it was a little bit more volume than less volume. At lower volume, it tends to kind of fall in, which is not all that surprising if you look at the graph and think about what it was going to do. That's exactly what it sounds like. So fourth, I would say Simco really delivered two sets with this one. Like I said, you do get two sets of nozzles. This is the silver one. There is a golder one. The silver one is definitely sharper, more detailed, more separated, more clarity, more like a hybrid with an extended upper range. And as I've said before, I don't mind a little less coherence. This one does have three drivers. So you get the dynamic driver, the planar, and the piezo. And for those of you who are really into coherence, you will sort of say that that doesn't really jive with what you are talking about. But for me, I am always willing to trade a little bit of three drivers sounding as one if the three drivers sound slightly different, but you get something special for the price. That is a trade-off that I am typically always for, and that's exactly what you get on the silver nozzle on EW300. Maybe it's not as natural sounding as you want, and maybe it takes on a slight timbre from the planar piezo, but it sounds very much like a hybrid. Very nice details, very nice dynamics, very nice separation, layering. All those things that you are expecting to get on hybrid techs actually come through on EW300. So I will say on the silver nozzle, it is a very fair trade-off that it is going to sound more technical, perhaps a little bit less natural, but my point of view on this is typically I paid for the drivers. I want to hear them. I want to hear them extended on both ends. That's kind of what you get on the silver nozzle on EW300. For those of you who are trying to think along the opposite lines of that and you like to have three drivers sound like a single dynamic driver, and specifically that single dynamic driver coherence all the way through the treble, you're probably going to listen to the gold nozzle, and that one is just a less technical sounding, smaller stage, more fun. It just has a warmer, smoother, softer sound to it. But that for me, I would say it's more of a mood nozzle. That when I'm in the mood for a bassier sound, a softer sound, that's kind of what I would gravitate to. But as a hybrid, as a three driver hybrid, I tended to gravitate towards the silver. But as I said, I think they actually delivered a really nice set even with the gold. It may not be my preference 100% of the time, but definitely when I'm in the mood, it definitely delivers on it. And they did the right thing, right? The silver one is probably a bit too edgy, too sharp for some people. So they give you a gold one, which is, you can kind of see what they did. It's not all that radically different, but they actually kind of dampen these two spots, which are very important, right? As you turn up the volume, these are very prominent vocals, instruments, lots of things hit there. So just to soften it a little bit with the gold was a brilliant move, and to keep the treble extension. So it's just kind of a more general appealing, easier on your ears style sound with the gold. It does get a little bit more warmth and a little bit more bass, but I'm not sure that's all that audible. What you're really hearing is this part reduced just a little bit and makes this part more present in the mix. That's essentially what you're going to hear with the gold. And again, it's just a softer, warmer sound, and to deliver both of them, so you have a hybrid silver sound and then a golder, which is going to bring you a little bit closer towards more coherence and really pull in both sides so they sound as one. I think it was a brilliant move, and they delivered it really well, as opposed to delivering maybe three nozzles and you have one that was super bright that no one uses, one that's in the middle that you call the balanced one, and then one that was the bass one that was super low that no one's going to use because it doesn't have enough treble. So by focusing on two and doing them right, I think they actually got that the idea of the tunable nozzles quite down as two usable versions of the same set. So my favorite was the silver plus the one foam. So it takes just a little bit of the hard edge from the silver, but it doesn't sound dampen and it doesn't affect the stage, and you can't even see the difference on it. But if you've actually watched my after shows and you know that I tend to move things by 1 decibel or 1 click on foobar, the silver plus one foam actually makes a lot of sense because you're just taking a very slight edge off of what you're hearing in the silver. And like I said, it's very sharp, very detailed, and that might not be everyone's cup of tea. So to just soften it just a very little bit with a foam will sound more appealing without losing any of the benefits of the silver, and doesn't go as dampened as the gold. So one foam kind of drops you a little bit. Two foams might get you a half step closer to the gold, but it's nice to have those options. So again, like I said, they delivered 2 sets. It's technically 3 sets because they get you 6 pairs of foam, and you can actually add 1 or 2. I'm not sure you can actually add all 3 into the nozzle. You probably can, but I thought the one piece of foam, very lightweight foam, low density foam, doesn't really move it all that much, but really just takes the edge off. And for those of you who've maybe listened to a speaker and had a speaker grill on it, and you take it on and off, and you sort of notice that there's a slight difference between the two, that's kind of what you notice with the foam. There's just a really subtle difference to it that was more appealing to me, just having one foam as opposed to not having the one foam. And the sound's just a little bit more intense, sharper. Just to cut that back a tiny bit was worth it for me on this foam. So that is exactly how I listen to it. And I would say I don't say this all often on Simgo sets, but even with the silver nozzle, even with that sharper, more detailed nozzle, the EW300 can definitely take on bass heavier genres because it has the level, right? That level was kind of right up there with Harman level, but then switch to even classical music because it hits that fast and tight and fast sound to it. It doesn't persist, it doesn't cloud, it doesn't veil. So I would say take the silver for EDM if you like those sharper, harder hits. I think the silver did that well. If you like that softer, kind of more warmer, bassy style, that will be for the gold. And again, not many sets pull off both of these genres at the same time. And this one just happened to have the bass level to do it and the driver that was capable of doing it. So yeah, again, this whole set, no matter how these two pan out, I think just the basic middle one, very, very versatile for lots and lots of genres. And I think HPBs will add something to it. That's probably a gap that I probably mentioned here somewhere. And then the DSP one will probably hit something else. Maybe it's just the DSP. But yeah, I think this whole trio probably worked out maybe a little bit better than I imagined it ever was going to. So another question is it better than Super Mix 4? And if you love Harman 2019 and Super Mix 4 was pretty much right on track with Harman 2019, then no, that specific sound is going to be appealing to you. For everyone else who prefers a more better balance of mid bass, sub bass, under Harman upper mids, then this is easily better than Super Mix 4. And having heard the one planar in EW300 and hearing the combo planar and one balanced armature in Super Mix 4, I would say the planar is probably more capable than it appeared in Super Mix 4. And I made this comment at the time, and I said, kind of compared to Dusk, the drivers in Super Mix 4 didn't quite deliver as they do in Dusk. That combination of 4 drivers on Dusk, those are really, really nice drivers. And it's pretty clear when you listen to it that those are very capable, very nice sounding, very natural sounding drivers. Super Mix 4 was kind of like okay for the price. And then when you bring the price down a little bit and take away the balanced armatures and hear what the planar can actually do in EW300, yeah, I think that the planar was probably more capable than I gave it credit for when I listened to Super Mix 4. So yeah, I don't see a huge loss in technical capability with EW300 compared to Super Mix 4. And certainly, if you aren't a Harman fan, you're going to gravitate a lot more to EW300. If you're a Harman fan, then Super Mix 4 is your favorite set ever because it's right on the target. So let me talk about some of these preference things and what I like and what maybe you like, maybe you don't like. But I'll sort of tell you what comes with EW300, and you can decide on your own if that's a match for your preferences or not preferences. But on the bass, like I said, I do like the tight and fast bass. I like tight and fast bass on hybrids specifically because the other drivers tend to be tighter and faster, and that's exactly what you got on EW300 as well. That planar and the piezo are going to have a very So the piezo and the planar are going to have that faster, sharper, more detailed, more resolution sound to them. You need a dynamic driver that balances with that too, and doesn't sound sluggish and slow and too persistent and doesn't have enough detail. So again, I think they paired the right driver with the other two drivers, and the bass response is very clean, very tight, very fast, exactly what I would want in a hybrid. But perhaps you might like more sub bass, you like a denser, persistent bass response, something that sounds a little bit more fun. Try the gold nozzle, that will get you a step in that direction. Perhaps the HBB version is actually a step in that direction also. But yeah, I think this one, especially with hybrids, I very much liked it, and I've complained a lot about dynamic drivers and hybrids, how they don't match the other drivers. I think Simgot did a very good job of matching a tighter driver with the other drivers, so they sound not so much the same coherence-wise, but speed-wise, so there isn't a noticeable sluggishness to the low end that is, a sharper mids and treble over the slower bass. Those tend to not sound all that good because it's a noticeable difference. So the mids, I do like the EW300 clarity and transparency, all those things that I talked about that you're going to get from a planar and a piezo, all those technical bits that you can hear on the resolution and layering and separation, all those things I like about especially the silver nozzle. And you might like a more analog, softer, rounder, less digital, more natural. Again, try the gold, that might get you there. But again, this is very much a preference to it. And some people are always going to gravitate towards dynamic drivers because they prefer that analog, softer, more rounded, less digital. This one sounds a little bit sharp. And again, I call it more digital. If you are very much a dynamic driver fan, you like a softer, rounder sound. And that always will sound more natural to you than having this trio of drivers where the dynamic driver is there, but it's only doing the bass, and then everything else is going to be kind of sharper, perhaps more digital, perhaps a little bit, not as natural to your ears because you prefer a dynamic driver sound. And on the treble, I do like the balance of it. It's not as bright as other Simgo sets, but it still extends. It still projects a big open sound exactly as it should. But, perhaps you might like, again, a dynamic driver. It can be a little bit more relaxed, more intimate, more of a dynamic driver style treble for long sessions. Some people just aren't really into hybrids and balanced armatures. They tend to be fatiguing, too extended, too sharp, too intense. I think EW300 brings along a lot of that, and it's going to be a match for people like me who hey, I spent a decent amount of money to hear three drivers, and I like to hear them as extended as they should be. And then other people I'll always prefer a dynamic driver style, and this will never be a match for them. But again, try the gold, try silver plus 1 foams, 2 foams. That will kind of get you this intermediate, softer, balanced version of the silver nozzle. And on the stage, I would say it's still better on the silver. Silver is a very nice stage. And actually, it was the part of Super Mix 4 that didn't match the price point because of that Harman tuning. It was really flat, and it didn't have some parts, and I talked very much about that in the after show. And what did I say about it? It needed a bit more mid-bass, a less upper mids, and that will get you a 3D stage. That's exactly what happened on EW300, and it sounds really, really good because of those two small changes. So do we need an after show on EW300? Not needed. I added the foams. I added 1 piece of foam to both nozzles and the silver. That was the only change I did. I didn't bother EQing it. It sounds really, really good as is. And again, mostly because of that matches my preferences. Do very much consider that, whether these are going to match the things that you look for on sets. When you get a new set and you start listening to a track, what's the first thing you notice? Is it this, the clarity, the resolution, the vocal articulation? Are you listening to a certain instrument that either sounds right in your head or wrong in your head? You tend to be more timbre focused if that's your thing. I tend to focus on some of the technical bits. I tend to focus on the stage. Those are more of my priorities, but that's not going to be everyone's priority. So do take that into consideration when you are looking at the EW300, and we will get to these guys soon. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.